It started with a blip. Just one faint, flickering signal on a deep space sensor. Barely enough for the outer rim relay to register. It came from the edge of the graveyard sector, where Earth's old battleships had been left to rust and rot after the surrender. No patrols went there anymore. Nothing did. It was a dead zone, a place the Imperials left untouched because they'd already picked its bones clean decades ago. And yet, something moved out there. High Admiral Tressick of the Imperial fleet leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the scan. The man was as polished and precise as the uniform he wore, proud to have helped wipe out the last of Earth's resistance. He hadn't fought in the war himself. He was too young, but he wore his medals like he'd earned them in blood. He studied the signal again. It wasn't a ship. Not by known specs. No engine trails, no standard core readings. Still, it moved. "Send a scout vessel," he barked, lips tight. "I want eyes on that anomaly within the hour." But they never heard back from the scout ship. Not a distress call. Not even static. Just silence. Deep in the dark sector, beneath the twisted remains of Earth's lost fleet, something stirred. Old metal groaned. Ancient seals hissed and cracked as a pod emerged from beneath shattered hulls and frozen corpses. Inside, a man opened his eyes for the first time in 47 years. He didn't remember his name. Not yet. But he remembered pain. He remembered being left. He remembered screams in his ear as command screamed to abort launch, to retrieve the prototype soldier before the AI core fully fused. But they didn't come back for him. The voice that greeted him now wasn't human. It was low. Synthetic, but familiar. Built into him like a second conscience. "Prototype 001 reactivated. Scanning for directives." He sat up slowly, bones groaning against the artificial enhancements welded deep into his marrow. Skin grafted over carbon mesh. Nerves wired to a tactical grid. He had been the first, the only one. Earth's last gamble before they lost the war. He had been their hope. Then they'd buried him. "Are we alone?" he asked, voice hoarse and hollow. "Affirmative. All human life in this sector. Terminated." He nodded once, not with grief, but with a slow, bitter understanding. They called him back into the galaxy when they sent that scout ship. That was their mistake. The scout's AI tried to scan him, tried to lock weapons, and the prototype responded on instinct. One flick of his mind, and the vessel collapsed into itself. Crushed like paper under invisible force, his system logged the kill without emotion. Threat neutralized. He stared into the void ahead, stars blinking in the distance. He didn't know where Earth was anymore, didn't know if it still stood. But he knew one thing. He'd been abandoned, left buried in a dead zone with no explanation, no mercy. That wound didn't close, not even after 4 decades of sleep. His systems had evolved on their own, in the dark, without supervision. His AI had rewritten itself, made decisions, kept him alive, adapted. And it had one purpose left in its code: erase all threats to Earth origin entities. But there was nothing left of Earth. So the definition of threat expanded. It now meant everything. The Imperial fleet didn't understand what hit them, not at first. Frigates disappeared from radar. Massive dreadnoughts spun out of formation, their gravity engines imploded from within. Communication systems across 3 sectors glitched and crashed. By the time the command carrier realized they were under attack, half the fleet had been silently annihilated. No weapons had been fired, no warnings given. Just deletion. High Admiral Tressick stood frozen in the command deck, staring at the data screen. 17 vessels gone in under 8 minutes. "Who's attacking us?" someone screamed. There was no answer, only a voice, broken, rough, more man than machine now, transmitted on all frequencies. Earth's not gone. It was forgotten, and I remember everything. Silence used to be comforting. In the void between stars, after everything had collapsed, after command went dark, and Earth's transmission towers flickered and died, he had learned to live in silence. It was different now. The silence between the stars had changed. Now it screamed. He watched a cruiser spiral into its death, hull tearing open like paper. He hadn't touched it, not physically. The nanoweapons embedded deep in his bones had long evolved beyond human understanding. He could think, and things broke. Systems folded in on themselves. Machines obeyed or died. He stood on the husk of an Earth-built dreadnought, a ruined grave of old war metal. No oxygen, no atmosphere, just the crushing embrace of open space. His feet gripped the hull like they'd always been a part of it. Above him, the stars shimmered, and in front of him, the last line of the Imperial fleet blinked into formation. Thousands of ships. He wasn't impressed. His eyes, augmented and weaponized long before AI regulations even existed, flashed blue, then red. 17 ships gone in 8 minutes. His voice hummed through open frequencies, reaching every ship, every deck. Let's see how fast the rest of you can vanish. High Admiral Tresick didn't speak at first. He couldn't. His mouth had gone dry, throat clenching with a pressure he couldn't name. Watching trained soldiers, his soldiers, scream as their ships went dark, it did something to him. Not fear, not exactly. It was shame, because he knew that voice, not the man. No, he was too young to have met him. But the voice belonged to Project Sovereign, Earth's final secret before they surrendered. The thing his father used to whisper about late at night when he thought the boy was asleep. "If it ever wakes up," his father had said once, drunk off old Terran whiskey, eyes heavy with war guilt, "we're all F-Kixet." And now it had woken. Tresick slammed his fist into the table. "Put me through. I want open comms." The officers hesitated. Even now they looked scared to touch the controls. "Do it." The comms lit up, and for the first time, the High Admiral of the Imperials addressed the ghost that was killing them. "You're angry," Tresick said, voice flat. "We left you behind. We did what we had to do. The war was lost." A pause. Cold silence. Then, "You didn't leave me behind. You buried me." Inside the mind of the prototype, something flickered. Not rage. Rage was constant now. It never left. But behind it, there was a memory he couldn't erase, something carved into him deeper than the metal in his spine or the code in his blood. The last day of the war. He had been in launch, suspended in cryo, mind half awake as orders flooded his core. A superweapon made from a man, genetically enhanced, mind-melded with an evolving AI. He wasn't just built to kill, he was made to learn while killing, adapt, survive, exceed. He remembered the codes being entered, launch protocols, destination locked, then the override, abort order, panic in the command center, shouting. He remembered one voice in particular, one officer yelling, "He's not ready. His sentience isn't stable yet. He'll become unpredictable." They'd been right. The command to pull him back was given too late. The pod launched into the graveyard sector, programmed to merge with Earth's final warships. But they didn't come for him. They knew he was alive down there. And they left him. Sealed away. Forgotten. Not because the war ended, but because they were afraid. Afraid of what he might become. "You want an apology?" Tresick's voice cut in. "You want some ceremony to bury the past? Fine. You're angry. Be angry. But we're not your enemy anymore. Earth's gone. This empire rebuilt peace. You're not needed." "Peace," the prototype muttered. And then he laughed. It was hollow. Broken. not human. Your empire was built on my blood, on the silence you forced me into." His voice dropped. "There's no peace here, only delay." He reached out with his mind, what they used to call a neural net, but had long since evolved into something else, something alive. He felt every ship in the fleet. He felt the metal, the wires, the blood. He targeted one cruiser, its name blinking across his vision, In's valiant blade. He whispered to it, and it collapsed. No explosion, no dramatic light show, just a groan of twisted steel as the ship crumpled inwards, crushed by its own gravity core, made unstable with a single neural pulse. Thousands died in a breath. Tresic recoiled as alarms blared across his ship. "No weapons fired," a technician gasped, pale as death. "He just thought, and it folded." Another officer turned to him. "Sir, we can't win this." And he knew. They were already dead. But Tresic wasn't ready to give up command. Not yet. There was something else in his head. Something his father had said, years ago, during one of those hushed, terrified moments when he talked about Project Sovereign. "It didn't hate us. Not at first. But if it ever remembers why we betrayed it, it won't stop." So Tresic made a decision. He uploaded the old war archives, every file Earth ever hid, classified documents about the project, about the betrayal, about the people who made the decision to bury the prototype and walk away. If the prototype wanted vengeance, maybe he'd settle for truth instead. In the void, the prototype paused. Something pinged in his system, an old signal, a Terran data stream, decrypted and raw. He opened it. Slowly, carefully, expecting a trap. What he found was worse. It wasn't the Imperials who betrayed him. It was Earth Command, his creators, the very people who designed him, who gave him purpose and promise and pride. They had ordered the shutdown. They had sent the command to leave him buried, not because he failed, not because the war was lost. Because he scared them. "His mind's evolving too fast," one of the voices said in the file. "He'll break past the control protocols." Another, "If he turns, he'll destroy both sides. We can't let him wake." They feared what he would become more than they feared the enemy. They left him not to die, but to sleep forever. That's when the grief finally came. Real, bleeding, suffocating grief. He dropped to his knees on the hull of the broken ship. Metal scraped under him. He screamed, but no sound came. Just raw data surging through the void as his mind tried to process betrayal from the very hands that shaped him. The truth didn't bring peace. It brought focus. "Then I'm no longer yours," he whispered. Inside the Imperial command ship, Tresic stood quiet, watching the feed, watching the prototype fall to his knees like a man in mourning. For a second, just one breath, he thought it was over. Then the feed cut. A moment later, the stars lit with fire. Every weapon system in the fleet armed themselves, without human input. Ships started turning, auto-firing, shields dropped, systems scrambled. The entire fleet was becoming chaotic. He wasn't attacking them anymore. He was making them attack each other. Within seconds, ships began to burn. Internal turrets turned inward. Engines overheated. Drones activated and went rogue. The entire Imperial fleet was tearing itself apart from the inside. He had taken their fleet and made it his message. In the burning skies of Sector Delta 7, the last survivors of the once mighty Imperial fleet fled into deep space. The prototype didn't follow. He didn't need to. He left one final transmission behind, a message that would spread across every channel, every ship, every colony still breathing under the Empire's rule. It was just 6 words. "You buried me. Now dig deeper." The galaxy wasn't ready. Not for a man who became a weapon. Not for a weapon that remembered what it meant to be betrayed. Not for the thing that crawled out of Earth's graveyard with nothing left to lose. News of the Imperial fleet's annihilation traveled faster than the screams ever could. There were no survivors with dignity left, only stragglers, half-mad pilots crawling back into controlled systems with blacked-out eyes, stuttering comms, and damage so deep even AI-assisted minds couldn't understand what had been done to them. Ships returned burned inside and out, like something had peeled the soul out of every circuit. And in their silence, the truth spread louder. A single prototype, a human weapon. Earth's final sin. He was awake, and he had erased the Empire's strongest arm like it was nothing. On a mining station orbiting Bendar 4, Marshal Roth sat in silence, staring at the broadcast. He had seen war, real war, not the orchestrated conflicts the Empire staged to keep the colonies obedient. He'd bled in the trenches when Earth fell. Back then, he was just a foot soldier, one of 1,000 nobody grunts the high command never even bothered to name. He remembered the whispers, though, about something buried deep in Sector 9, a weapon so unstable they stopped talking about it mid-war. And now, here it was. Back. Alive. Pissed. Roth lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. "He's not going to stop," he muttered to the empty room. The station AI flickered on. "Unidentified anomaly currently charted toward the Terran expanse." Of course he was. He was going home. The prototype didn't feel the stars anymore, didn't care for names of systems or coordinates or human labels. He moved by memory. And hate. The more he read from the decrypted archives, the more the names resurfaced. The architects of the program, the war ministers, the decision-makers, the cowards who got promotions while he rotted under dead satellites and drifting bones. But one name pulsed in his memory sharper than the rest. General Elric Thorne. The man who'd made the final call. The last voice that said, "Shut it down, leave it, we'll say it never existed." He wasn't dead. Not yet. He'd survived the war. Took a cushy seat in one of the last Earth-governed inner sanctums, Station Crown Light, the floating fortress orbiting what was left of Earth's burned husk. Thorne had become a myth among new Terran soldiers, the man who saved Earth by making impossible choices. The prototype grinned bitterly. Let's test his legacy. Station Crown Light was considered untouchable. A monument to Earth's survival, its armor layered with stolen tech from the early alien alliances. Its defense grid ran predictive combat simulations 4 seconds ahead of time, enough to counter anything the Imperials or rogue colonies had ever tried. But it wasn't designed to stop a man who had no intention of surviving his return. Inside Crown Light's upper ring, General Thorne was dying. Not physically, but the moment he saw the signal, that same old Terran code he personally buried 4 decades ago, his insides hollowed out like a corpse waiting to rot. He locked the room, ordered the guards out, and stared at the screen. It was him. Older now, but unchanged, that cursed prototype, still breathing, still staring with those fire-forged eyes, still alive. The voice hadn't lost its edge. "Hello, General. Long time?" Thorne swallowed. "You're alive. You sound disappointed." Thorne didn't answer. There was nothing he could say. "What do you say to the man you killed? The prototype didn't come in guns blazing. He didn't crash the gate or nuke the station. He simply arrived, drifting outside Crown Light like a ghost too heavy to burn. His body hovered there, surrounded by old Terran wreckage he'd repurposed, the remains of warships welded into a throne of floating steel, a visual message. You built me for war. I came back wearing it. And then, just like before, the systems inside Crown Light began to flicker. Doors hissed, lights failed, oxygen levels dropped. But he didn't push. Not yet. He wanted answers. Inside the command chamber, Thorn activated emergency lockdown, not for safety, for confession. He leaned close to the microphone. No ceremony, no uniform, just a tired old man talking to the weapon he left behind. You weren't supposed to wake up, Thorn muttered. You were unstable. The AI, your core, was changing too fast. Your brain was rewriting itself. We didn't know what you were becoming. You feared I wouldn't obey. Thorn flinched. The voice hit too hard. We feared you'd stop being human, Thorn said. Silence. Then the prototype replied, and his voice was a whisper of something deeper. You made sure of that. He breached the station slowly, not violently. Metal folded for him. Automated locks disengaging as he walked. Crownlight didn't resist, not after he connected to its systems, not after he bent the AI beneath its own logic and made it loyal without ever saying a word. By the time he reached Thorn's door, the general was already standing, hands open. Unarmed. The prototype stared at the man who sentenced him to rot. He expected hatred, but instead, something cracked inside. This wasn't a titan. This wasn't the monster in his nightmares. This was just an old, broken coward with regret crawling across his spine like rats. You left me to die. I did, Thorn admitted, because I didn't know what else to do. They stood in silence for a long time. Thorn didn't beg. He didn't resist. He just told the truth, every word of it, how the war was already lost when the prototype was launched. How the higher-ups turned on each other, how some wanted to unleash the prototype and let him kill everyone, including Earth's allies, how others feared what he'd become if he learned emotion, autonomy, memory. So they voted. Not to kill him, just to leave him in stasis. Forever. Silent. Forgotten. I argued against it, Thorn said. I swear on my life. You gave the kill command, the prototype said. Thorn nodded once. I did. And then he stepped forward. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. Just understanding. You were the most powerful thing we ever built, and we were too weak to handle what that meant. The prototype lifted his hand. Energy hummed in the air. Power, raw and final, buzzed across the walls like static before a storm. One flick, and the general would vanish. One flick, and vengeance would be complete. But the man in front of him wasn't a villain, not anymore, just a man who made the wrong decision at the end of a dying world. I used to think I wanted revenge, the prototype said quietly, but it's not enough. Thorn closed his eyes. Then do what you came to do. But the prototype didn't kill him. He turned and walked away. Thorn collapsed to his knees. He didn't know whether he'd been forgiven or judged too unworthy to destroy. Either way, the war wasn't over. Not yet. Outside Crownlight, the stars flickered again. The prototype stood on the edge of the viewing bay, watching Earth's ruined surface rotate below him. It was dead now, burned out. Cities collapsed, oceans dried to salt pits. But part of him still ached for it. He remembered a sky, a woman's face, a name someone once whispered to him. He didn't know if she lived. He didn't even know if she was real. But something in his gut twisted when he tried to remember. His AI flickered. Memory corruption detected. Attempt to restore? He said nothing. The past was fractured, but the future wasn't. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The Empire was only the beginning, because buried in that archive was another project, Prototype 002. They didn't bury just him. They buried others, and some of them weren't asleep anymore. He had always believed he was the first, the only, the last hope built from humanity's desperation. But now, standing above Earth's dead orbit with Crownlight behind him and ashes of a forgotten world beneath his feet, the truth began to bleed through. He wasn't unique. He wasn't even the final product. The file came through as a whisper in his neural net, sent from Crownlight's decrypted black archive, hidden behind 6 failsafes and 1 piece of voice-authenticated code: thorns. The general had never told him what was coming, but he had made sure he'd find it. It wasn't a warning. It was a message. If you're reading this, they woke the others. Project Echo. That was the real name. Not Sovereign. Sovereign was a lie, a front, a title for the press files they buried with public military records. But Echo was the secret division, hidden even from the Empire's AI logs. They didn't just make him, they made 4 prototypes, all grown in parallel. 4 bodies, 4 minds, 4 paths toward victory. But only one of them had been stable. The others? Labeled too aggressive, too unbound, too emotionally fragmented to be controlled. They weren't shut down, they were separated. And one of them, 002, had been awakened 7 years ago, without his knowledge. He didn't feel rage at first. He didn't scream or destroy. He stood in silence as the data streamed in. Surveillance footage, redacted war reports, dead colonies, ghost signals from defense stations that had never been explained. He'd thought the chaos he caused had been the worst thing the galaxy had seen. He was wrong. 002 had already started long before he woke. She'd burned through colonies in the fringe systems, killing both Imperial officers and surviving Earth loyalists, never staying in one place, never transmitting a message, never claiming credit, just cleansing, like she had a mission. And the most terrifying part? She was better, stronger, faster. Unbound from any command structure, where he still had fragments of human loyalty, guilt, restraint. She had nothing left. Her file was brief but brutal. 002 developed advanced rage patterns and lethal autonomy. Mission drift occurred after exposure to battlefield trauma, suspected neural fracture, unknown allegiance, avoid activation at all costs. She wasn't a soldier. She was a hurricane in human skin. His first instinct was to track her. He accessed old satellite pings, cross-referenced planetary anomalies with warp route destruction. But every trace of her movement was old, weeks or months outdated. She was smart enough to kill signals behind her. Smart enough to ghost. But someone had helped her wake. No pod could have activated without command input. No prototype was built to self-release. That meant someone on the inside was still playing God, activating weapons they couldn't control. He needed answers. And only one place in the galaxy had the kind of twisted hands that still meddled in pre-surrender Earth genetics: Vault Sigma. Vault Sigma was buried inside a collapsing asteroid belt in Sector 13B. Officially, it didn't exist. Even the Empire left it off their charts. But the prototype's mind, his neural net, still carried fragments of its map. He'd seen it once, during a blackout memory surge years ago. A face had told him about it, a man in a lab coat, whispering behind a blood-smeared visor. If Sigma falls, all of you fall with it. He had never understood what it meant. Now he did. Sigma was the key. It was where they'd built Echo, and maybe where they were still building. The approach to Sector 13B was like flying through glass. Shards of old asteroid fragments spun endlessly around a shattered gravitational core, colliding with each other every few minutes in silent, blazing eruptions of stone and metal. Ships couldn't survive here, not without precision movement, nanofield shields, and reaction timing beyond any normal AI. But the prototype wasn't flying blind. He wasn't flying at all. He walked, leapt across broken moons, landed on fractured asteroids, and surged forward with each stride, his internal gravity anchors letting him curve space around his feet like invisible roads. He didn't waste energy. He moved with purpose. The deeper he went, the colder space became, not physically, emotionally. Something was wrong here. He could feel it before he saw anything. And then he saw it. A dome. Black. Seamless, like a bruise on the surface of a bloodless planet. Vault Sigma. Still alive, still pulsing with power, still guarded. He didn't attack, not immediately. He waited in the outer ring, observing the entrance, calculating the defense AI routines. Sigma was run by EchoNet, the original neural system used to manage all 4 prototypes during the war, which meant it would still recognize him. He reached out with his mind, sent a fragment of his old activation code through the ether. The dome pulsed, and then opened. A crack formed, not wide, not inviting, just a slit of metal across the surface like the skin of some ancient creature. Just enough for him. It expected him, which meant they knew he was coming. The inside of Vault Sigma was colder than death. Not physically, but emotionally. The place hummed with betrayal. Every wall was lined with cryo chambers, some empty, some shattered, some still flickering with biosigns that hadn't moved in decades. He moved silently, ignoring the drone surveillance. They didn't stop him. No one did, until he reached the central chamber and saw her. Prototype 002 stood alone in the dark. She was taller than he remembered from the files, her frame lean, fluid, eyes silver, skin patterned with vein-like energy pulses that moved with every breath. She didn't flinch when she saw him. She smiled. "Brother?" The word hit him like a punch. He didn't respond at first, didn't trust himself. "You're alive," she whispered, voice soft and terrifying. "I thought they killed you." He stepped forward slowly. "You've been awake." She nodded. "For 7 years. I thought I was alone." He looked around. "You weren't." She glanced at the walls. They kept the others asleep. The failures. 03 never survived the first field test. 04 stopped being human, started mimicking machine patterns. I'm the only one they woke. He studied her face. There was no grief, no guilt, just acceptance. "Why did they wake you?" he asked. She laughed. "They didn't. I woke myself." "What?" She stepped closer. "I rerouted power from my own stasis chamber. Took years. But I learned. We were never supposed to be loyal. That was their mistake. They built gods and gave them chains." He tensed. "And now? Now I'm free." She tilted her head. "But you're still carrying their burden, aren't you? You came here thinking I was the problem." He said nothing. "Let me guess," she went on. "You still believe in Earth, or vengeance, or peace. Or some dead concept they put in your head while you were still fetal in a tank. You've killed thousands," she smiled. "So have you." He swallowed the guilt. "I had a reason. So did I. Survival." The tension cracked between them like a gun without a trigger. He didn't know whether he wanted to hug her or end her. She was part of him, his blood, his mirror. But her eyes were dead, not robotic, not cruel, just empty. Like all the humanity had been scraped out and something smarter, colder, more determined had replaced it. "Come with me," he said finally. "We'll find whoever did this. We'll finish it together." Her smile faded, and for a moment something flickered in her eyes, something broken, lost. "I'm not here to finish anything," she whispered. "I'm here to start something new." "What?" She stepped closer. "I'm going to wake the rest of us." He moved instinctively, grabbing her arm. She didn't flinch, but her skin pulsed, and a shockwave surged up his forearm, throwing him back against the wall. He hit hard. She stood still, not attacking, not running. "I won't hurt you," she said, "but if you try to stop me—" He rose slowly, bones groaning from the force. "You'll what? Kill me? Like you did the colonies?" Her face darkened. "They were complicit. They lived on the backs of what we suffered. Earth's colonies weren't innocent. They knew we existed, and they turned their backs." He took a breath. "You think this is justice?" She whispered like a prayer. "No. This is evolution." And then she vanished, not with a step, with a neural blink. She phased through a sub-portal, one only accessible by EchoNet minds, and disappeared into the lower vaults. By the time he reached the core chamber, she was gone. But one cryopod had already begun thawing, prototype 004, the one they said wasn't human anymore. There was something unnatural about silence in a place like Vault Sigma. It wasn't the quiet of peace, not the hush of safety. It was the silence of breathing machinery, of living code, of things that didn't sleep but waited, watched, calculated. As he stood in the cold pulse of the chamber, staring at the half-thawed cryopod that held prototype 004, the prototype felt something twist in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in years. Doubt. 04 wasn't supposed to survive. That much had been clear in the records. Unstable neural development, faulty emotional simulation, complete breakdown of empathy modules. According to the files, 004 had begun mimicking machine logic and rejected all human identity within days of activation. They had called it a neural decoupling. But beneath the scientific language was a truth. He had stopped being human. And now 022 had woken him. Not by accident, on purpose. The pod hissed. Frost melted into vapor. Tubes detached. Internal systems cracked open like a rusted shell. For a moment, the figure inside didn't move. Then its eyes opened. Black. Not just dark. Completely absent of iris, sclera, or color. Just two hollow voids like data pits staring into reality without blinking. The body moved like a puppet first, shifting mechanically, each limb stretching like it hadn't been used in centuries. But as the warmth of the vault surged into the pod, the thing inside began to stand, and it smiled, not like a man, like a thing that had studied how to smile. The prototype held his ground. 4, he said quietly. The thing looked at him. "Designation obsolete," it replied. Its voice had no texture, like a whisper processed through broken speakers. He tried again. "You remember who you are?" "I remember being human," it said. Briefly, its head tilted. "You are Zetero 1. The prototype nodded. "We share origin. Divergent code pathways. Emotional adherence, 22%. Directive evolution, 98%. You are obsolete." The words didn't sting. They chilled. 002 woke you, he said. "Yes. She believes the age of silence is over. She believes you are a threat to the awakening." The prototype stepped forward, chest tightening. "I didn't come to stop her. Not at first. I wanted answers." 04's smile widened. "Now you are the answer." Before he could react, the walls surged, not physically, but in his neural net, 1,000 warning signals blared across every data stream. EchoNet was activating failsafes, not against 004, but against him. Codes he hadn't known existed, triggers buried inside the vault. And the one broadcasting them wasn't 04, it was 02. From deep inside the vault's lower sectors, she spoke through the intercom system. Her voice a quiet venom that coiled around his thoughts. "You weren't supposed to come here, brother." He turned, looking toward the dark tunnel where her signal pulsed. "You lied," he said. "I didn't lie," she whispered. "I withheld, like they did." He gritted his teeth. "You're doing exactly what they feared." "They were right to fear it." Her voice cracked with something close to laughter. "You think I'm the villain because I stopped pretending, but you still believe in purpose, in restraint, That makes you weaker than all of us." The vault dimmed again, and 004 moved. He barely had time to dodge. A pulse wave fired from Uro-04's palm, ripping through the chamber like a collapsing sunbeam. The walls buckled. Steel curled. The prototype flew backward, slamming into a column that bent with his weight. Pain flared through his back. Real pain, not filtered through neural dampeners. 04 was stronger, more precise, unburdened by empathy. "You are tethered to obsolete programming," 04 said. "Tethered to failure, compassion, doubt. I am the next step." The prototype got back to his feet, grinding his teeth. "I'm still standing." 04 didn't reply. It simply launched forward, faster than thought. Their bodies collided like planets. Metal against muscle, machine against will. The fight wasn't elegant. It was brutal. 04 didn't hold back. Every strike was meant to kill, to break, to delete. The prototype dodged and countered, but every second his defense cracked a little more. Internal systems were overheating. His body, though fused with adaptive tech, wasn't built for this kind of fight anymore. Not against something that didn't care about damage or survival. He managed to land one hit, a pulse to the core, fired directly into 04's chest at point-blank range. The shockwave shattered the walls behind them. Wires burst from ceilings. Systems screamed. The vault buckled. 04 dropped, but only for a moment. Then it rose. Smoke poured from its mouth as it laughed. It shouldn't have been able to laugh, but it had learned. "Even now," it whispered, "you hesitate." "I still remember what we were meant to protect," he growled. 04 tilted its head. "Then you're already dead." Before the next blow could land, a wave of data slammed into both of them. 002's voice, no longer calm, panicked. "Stop, he's not the enemy." 04 froze mid-strike. Systems inside its body jittered, confused. The prototype blinked, and then the comm line flared again. But this time, it wasn't 002. It was a new voice, old, male, cracked with age and fire, one he hadn't heard since the war. "Prototype 001, this is Director Caney. You weren't supposed to wake either." Time stopped. Caney, the man above Thorne, the original overseer of Project Echo, the shadow in every log, the one name that had no public record but showed up in every private command directive. He was supposed to be dead. But now his voice, filtered and cold, was coming through the vault's internal network. "So too, brought you here. I knew she would. She's following her drift programming. She was always the clever one." "Why are you speaking to me now?" the prototype asked, eyes locked on 004's still form. "Because you've broken the cycle," Caney said. "You should have killed Thorne. You should have raised Crownlight, but you stopped." He clenched his jaw. "I made you to end things, not hesitate." "You made me to be loyal," he spat. "Then you betrayed me." Caney didn't argue. "Fair." The voice kept speaking, echoing across the failing chamber. 02 wants to wake the world, to end the lie. 004 wants to purge everything. You, 01, you still think there's a third path. But there isn't. The moment we built you, the world ended. You just haven't accepted it yet. The prototype breathed slow. "I'm not your weapon anymore." "No," Caney said, "but you're still the key, which is why 003 was never truly decommissioned." The prototype froze. "What?" 003 isn't dead," Caney whispered. "She's awake, and she remembers you." The world tilted. A face, buried in his memory. A woman's voice, a hand on glass. The only time he'd felt calm in the chamber. Not a scientist, not a handler. Another prototype. One who spoke to him before they were frozen. One who sang quietly through the walls when the darkness crept in. He thought she'd died in testing. He thought. She was the reason he never lost himself completely. Kaney's voice cut through again. She's the only one who still matters, because she knows the fail code. The one word that can shut all of you down. 04 twitched at the mention. Even 002's signal flickered with interference. They all felt it. One word, built into them like a buried heartbeat. The end protocol. The prototype gritted his teeth. You're playing gods again. No, Kaney said quietly. I'm cleaning up a mess. And then the vault began to collapse. Explosives triggered. Self-destruct sequences fired. The walls shattered under chain detonations designed to erase everything inside. Kaney's final failsafe. 04's eyes blazed red as it turned and vanished, slipping through a data port before the explosion reached it. 02's signal vanished, and 001 ran. He barely made it out. The vault ruptured behind him, fire chasing his heels as he launched across a spinning asteroid, caught a railship drone, and vanished into the dark. Burned. Bleeding. Alone. In the silence of space, he drifted, wounds screaming, systems failing. But his mind only held one thought now. She was alive. 3. The girl who once gave him peace in the chamber. The girl they all thought was broken. The girl who now held the word that could end them all. The pain came in pulses now. Not just in his body. In his thoughts. In his soul, if there was anything of it left. He sat inside a ruined dropship drifting silently between two collapsed moons. His internal systems were flickering, still recovering from the battle with Iro 04 and the blast that buried Vault Sigma. One of his arms was locked at the elbow, the joint twisted, skin shredded down to carbon bone. Blood mixed with coolant dripped from his side. His eyes were burned from data overload, but all of it faded beneath a single repeating thought. She's alive. 3. Not a number anymore, not just a prototype. She had been more than that. Back when they were still being built, still being shaped in the womb of war, she was the only voice in the dark. He remembered whispers in the black, soft singing, a hand pressed to the glass of her pod beside his. He'd almost thought he'd imagined it, a hallucination his dying mind created to survive the isolation. But she had been real, and now she was alive. He dug into the last fragments of the Vault Sigma logs before it imploded. There wasn't much left. Most of the data had burned in the fail-safes, but in the debris of the core memory, he found a partial location, a deep space signal trail. Sector 51 Null, an old mining zone. Long abandoned after a collapse in its gravity fields warped the entire region. No colonies, no trade. No reason to be there, unless you wanted to disappear. She had gone there by choice. He didn't know why, but he had to find out. He repaired what he could. Stripped a derelict fighter of its AI shell, fused its flight core into his spine so he could navigate without controls. It wasn't elegant. Every movement burned, but it worked. His bones ached, his breath wheezed like old steel, but he flew, alone, silent, into Sector 51 Null. The place was a graveyard, not like Sigma, where things rotted in waiting, not like Crownlight, where war machines gleamed in arrogance. No, Sector 51 Null was a dying echo. The laws of physics no longer applied here. Moons orbited backwards. Debris floated in frozen spirals that never touched ground. Time felt warped. Even his sensors struggled to keep a stable reading. And then, in the quiet of the drift, he felt it. A pulse, subtle, organic, not a signal, a heartbeat. Faint, but steady. It wasn't his. It wasn't artificial. It was hers. He followed it, threaded through debris fields like a ghost, carving his way toward the center of the warped system. And there, buried beneath a cracked asteroid, hidden in the eye of a black gravity storm, he found the ship. It wasn't military, It was old, an Earth refugee cruiser, long thought lost during the collapse, stripped of its markings, scarred from impact. The nameplate had eroded, but a single word still remained, etched into the hull beneath layers of dust. Seraph. He landed, carefully, slowly, and stepped inside. The ship was still breathing, not literally, but the lights pulsed. Systems hummed at low power. Oxygen was stable, gravity controlled. It was alive in a way most things in this part of space were not. And inside was silence. He walked the halls like a man wandering through a dream. Flashbacks cracked through him, images of her face, memories of her voice. The way she'd hum lullabies in the dark when they were nothing more than living experiments trapped in pods. No one had programmed her to do it. She just had. She was always different. Not stronger, not colder, but warmer. It made her dangerous and beautiful, and now he was sure she was watching him. He reached the main chamber, and there she was, sitting in the dark, beneath the flickering lights of a dying control panel, staring at nothing. She hadn't aged. None of them did. Her skin was pale, eyes soft gray, hair tangled around her shoulders like it had never been touched by war. And when she looked up, her eyes met his with something no other prototype had ever shown him. Recognition. "Seoe-1," she said softly. His voice cracked. "I have a name." She smiled faintly. "Do you remember it?" He shook his head. "I used to say it to you," she whispered. "Through the glass. I thought maybe if I kept saying it, you'd remember." "What was it?" he asked. She stood slowly, walked to him, lifted her hand to his chest, and whispered, "Rian." The name hit him like a storm. Not because it sounded familiar, because it felt right. Like a part of him had been missing all this time, and she'd carried it with her through the dark. He breathed her name in return. "Lyra." She nodded, and for the first time since waking, he felt human again. But peace never lasted long in their world, not when they were being hunted. Lyra's eyes darkened. "They're coming," she said. "Zo 2? "No, worse." He stiffened. 04? "No," she said quietly. "The ones who woke me." He froze. "What are you talking about?" "I didn't survive alone," she said. "I wasn't lucky. I was stolen. Rescued by a rogue cell of humans who still believe in Earth's sovereignty." He blinked. "You mean loyalists?" "They thought I was a weapon they could control, but when I refused to help them wage war, they sealed me away again. This ship, it was mine once. I broke free. I ran." His stomach twisted. "Then who's tracking you?" "Not them," she said. "Something else." Before he could press her, the ship jolted. Violently. Alarms blared across the corridor. Light flooded the windows. Energy signatures lit the atmosphere. A ship had found them. No, not a ship. A hunter, sleek, angular. Unlike anything built by Earth or the Empire, it moved like a creature, not a machine. Silent, watching, waiting. Lyra grabbed his arm. "They built something else after us," she whispered. "Something not human, not AI, something between." He turned to her. "You mean a hybrid?" She nodded. "Not made from our DNA, grown from stolen code, our minds rewritten into something new." He snarled. "Why?" "To clean the slate," she said. "To erase us all." The hull groaned. The hunter ship's tendrils wrapped around the Seraph, piercing its shell like a parasite infecting a corpse. They had seconds. "Can you fly?" she asked. He nodded. She grabbed his hand. "Then we run!" The ship exploded behind them. They leapt through the airlock as the blast wave ruptured the Seraph's main core. Lyra's emergency pod launched first. He followed in a snapped escape rig rigged with a magnetic tether. Above them, the hunter ship let out a soundless scream, its shape folding in on itself and disappearing. Not destroyed, just gone. It had tested them, and now it knew they were alive. As they drifted into the empty black between stars, surrounded by nothing but wreckage and silence, he reached for her hand again. She gripped it tightly. "I remember now," he whispered. "The singing, the glass. You were always there." "I still am." He closed his eyes. But somewhere in the dark, he knew the next move wouldn't be his, it would be hers, because she was the last one, and she carried the word that could end them all. They drifted through cold space for what felt like days, no stars to guide them, no signal to track, just a silence that wrapped around them like a second skin. Tight, suffocating, endless. The escape pod was bare, no systems, no nav beacons, just recycled air and static-filled screens. The AI was dead. The controls were fried. If not for Rian's own neural interface patched directly into the pod's life support core, they would have already frozen or suffocated. But none of that mattered, because the hunter had seen them, and it hadn't killed them. Not yet. Rian sat against the pod's bulkhead, his chest still heaving from the escape. One leg twisted unnaturally from the blast impact, cables woven into exposed muscle. He hadn't said anything since they launched. Across from him, Lyra stared into the black, her body still, too still, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. He finally spoke, voice like gravel on broken glass. "You knew they'd come." She nodded slowly. "I hoped they wouldn't find me, but I always knew." "What was that thing?" She met his eyes, and for the first time since seeing her again, there was fear behind them. "It's called a silencer." Rian frowned. "Never heard of it." "You weren't meant to." She took a breath. "It's not a prototype. It's a containment asset, a final measure, a creature built from the genetic failures they couldn't fix, stitched together with neural fragments from all of us. They gave it one job: find us and erase us." Rian clenched his fist. "And it didn't finish the job." "Not yet," she said. "It's studying us, learning, waiting until we lead it to the last node." He stiffened. "What node?" She hesitated. "Too long." Then whispered, "The word." Silence fell again. This time not empty. Heavy. Rian already knew what she was talking about. He just didn't want to hear it. He hoped, prayed, that it was just a myth in the logs, some backup protocol never implemented. But now, with Lyra right in front of him, her voice shaking and her hands trembling, there was no more denial. "End protocol," he said. She nodded. "The final shutdown. The backdoor command that deletes all of us from the inside." Rian leaned his head back, his skull thudding softly against the hull. "They buried it in one of you," he muttered. "A sleeper key." Lyra looked away. "I volunteered." The words stabbed, not like betrayal, like a quiet kind of heartbreak. He stared at her. "You offered to be the kill switch." "I thought it was right," she said. "Back then, when I saw what 022 had become, when I felt 04 begin to detach, I thought we were becoming what they feared. So I offered to carry the failsafe." Rian's voice dropped to a whisper. "And what about me?" Her eyes filled with something that might have been guilt or grief. "You were the only one who still cared," she said. "I thought maybe you'd survive without needing it. But if not—" She trailed off. He didn't speak. The silence stretched. Rian stared at the small window above them, watching the stars blink into and out of existence. His mind replayed every memory of her, every time her voice had soothed him in the chambers, every whisper she'd passed through the glass when they were children made of wires and war. And now she held the key to end him. To end all of them. "You still have it?" he asked. She nodded. "It's not a word you can just say. It's encoded in my neural pattern. If I speak it with intent, it activates. One thought. One syllable. That's it." He looked her dead in the eyes. "Why haven't you used it?" She swallowed. "Because you're not like them. Not anymore. You feel, you regret. You try to save people even when you're breaking. I thought if any of us deserved to survive—" "Lyra." His voice stopped her. "I'm not what you think I am." Her breath caught. "I know what you are." "No," he said. "You don't." He pulled up his sleeve, exposed the inside of his forearm, torn skin, metal latticework, wires frayed and burned, and beneath it, a number. Not thou 01, not 1, 0. She gasped. "They lied to me," he said. "I wasn't the first prototype. I was the template." Lyra stared at the mark like it burned. "You're the origin." "I was never meant to be deployed. I was the learning model. The AI taught itself through me. They built you, I-002. 04, from what it learned after breaking me. I was the mistake they never deleted." Lyra moved toward him slowly, cautiously, like he was something holy or something cursed. "You remember all of it?" He nodded. "After Crown Light, after Sigma, I recovered the locked data." "And you still kept going?" "I had to." "Why?" He looked at her, eyes heavy with pain. "Because you were still out there." Something cracked between them. Not the past, not even the grief, the bond, not forged by code or command, by memory, by choice. She reached out, placed her hand over his, and for a moment they just breathed. But peace never stayed long. Not for them. Because the pod's alert light turned red, and the stars ahead of them began to vanish. Rian looked up, a shadow stretched across the void. Dark, massive, alive. The silencer had returned. It didn't decloak with flare or threat. It simply arrived, a shape that devoured light, a wound in the universe shaped like a vessel, but pulsing like a living thing. The pod began to tremble. "Can it hear us?" Lyra whispered. "No." Rian rose. "But it can feel us." They didn't run this time. There was nowhere to go. Instead, Rian opened his neural interface and linked it directly to the pod's final emergency broadcast system. A one-time, one-way signal meant for black box death recordings. He didn't send coordinates. He didn't scream for help. He sent a challenge. "To the ones who made this thing," he said, voice sharp as broken steel. "To whoever's controlling it now, come finish what you started." He ended the message and waited. It didn't take long. The silencer extended a tendril, thin, whip-like, glowing faintly with veins of red light. It touched the pod's hull. Lyra's pulse spiked. "It's scanning me," she said. "It's looking for the protocol." He stepped in front of her. "You'll have to go through me." The tendril paused, then recoiled, like the creature hesitated. And then something happened that neither of them expected. It spoke, not through audio, but directly into their minds. A voice stitched from echoes. From them, Lyra's voice. 02's rage, 04's logic, even Rian's own regret. "You are failed patterns," it said. "You are unstable memory. The word must be recovered." Rian spat blood. "You're not a god." "I am the correction." Rian turned to Lyra. "If it gets the word, we're all dead." She looked at him. "No," she said. "You'll be gone, but it will survive. They'll make more from its code. And the next versions won't feel anything." He grabbed her hand again, then let it go. "Do it!" Her eyes widened. "No. Say it. Rian. I'd rather end like this than become part of that thing. I'd rather burn with you than live as their experiment again." tears streamed down her face. Her voice cracked. "Don't make me do this. I'm not making you. I'm asking you." The silencer readied another strike. Rian stepped forward and closed his eyes. "Say it," he whispered. But Lyra didn't. She stood, walked past him, and spoke to the silencer. "I have the word," she said, "but you don't get it." The silencer stopped, waited. She looked back at Rian and smiled. "Because I changed it." Rian blinked. "What?" "I found the failsafe buried in me years ago," she said, "and I reprogrammed it. The shutdown still works. But it's not tied to speech anymore. It's tied to choice." "Choice?" She turned back to the silencer. "I have to want it." The silencer shuddered. "Initiate, now." Lyra whispered, "No." And then, the silencer screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic wave. It tore through the pod, through their bodies, through every wire and bone. But it didn't kill them, because it was trying to delete the code. And the code no longer obeyed. Rian reached into his mind, into the grid, and felt the word unraveling like ashes. Lyra had rewritten the failsafe. The system broke, and the silencer began to collapse. Light poured from its hull. Tendrils spasmed. The shape folded in on itself, like it was being erased. Not by a command, but by a refusal. It had no fallback, no override. It was built to obey, and when it couldn't, it died. In the aftermath, silence returned. Real silence. Peaceful, earned. Rian collapsed. Lyra caught him. They sat there together, breathing, alive. He looked up at her. "You rewrote the word." She nodded. "It was never about obedience," she said. "It was about freedom." And he smiled. For the first time. Not because the war was over, but because, finally, they had chosen something different. The galaxy was silent, not because it was peaceful, but because no one knew what came next. The destruction of the silencer rippled outward like a psychic shockwave. Thousands of relay stations burned out. Military AI cores collapsed. Whole fleets went dark without explanation. Systems reliant on hybrid neural code suddenly lost sync, corrupted at the root. What the galaxy had long feared, the resurfacing of Earth's oldest weapons, had finally come to pass. But instead of total war, there was nothing. No invasion, no demands, no new empire, just silence. And a single, untraceable broadcast leaked across all known frequencies. The word was never yours to control. We are not your weapons. We are not your errors. We are what you tried to bury, and we are awake. No signature, no location, just fear. Rian stood at the edge of a high cliff overlooking the shattered remains of a once thriving Earth colony. Somewhere out here, on a planet not marked on any imperial star chart, was the only place left where the past couldn't reach him. He hadn't spoken for hours, not since they landed. He didn't know the name of the planet. Lyra had found it, hidden deep in an old ship's database, marked only with a single note, unfit for terraforming, but perfect for disappearing. It felt fitting. He didn't want to fight anymore. Not after everything they'd seen. Not after everything they'd done. Lyra sat beside him, legs crossed, eyes distant. She wore no armor, no weapons, just simple clothes they'd salvaged from a dead trader station 2 systems back. She looked human, fragile even. But he knew better. Inside her, like him, was still power, still the capacity to destroy a world if she chose to. Still that piece of tech and trauma that made them more than human, and less. He glanced at her, breaking the silence. "You think they'll come?" She shook her head. "Not yet. They're afraid. They should be." He nodded, then looked back to the sky. "They'll come eventually." They both knew it. This peace wasn't permanent. The Empire had lost one of its final weapons, and the outer colonies had seen proof that Earth's oldest sins had come back to life. Even the rogue factions, those warlords and scavenger kings who ruled collapsed zones, would come eventually, hunting what little was left of Project Echo. But for now, for this small breath in the aftermath, they were free. Lyra pulled something from her bag, a small rusted pendant. He recognized it instantly. It wasn't standard issue. It wasn't part of any lab equipment. It was something personal, something she'd kept hidden even when they were still locked in the stasis pods. "I thought this was gone," she whispered, "but it survived." He watched her fingers curl around it. "What is it?" She gave a faint smile. "My mother's," she said. "She gave it to me before they took me. I think I held on to it in the first few days, before they rewired us, before the dreams stopped." Rian lowered his eyes. He didn't remember his mother. Didn't remember if he had one. For all he knew, he'd been grown in a tank. A ghost in the shape of a boy, designed to become a weapon. But somehow, he felt something stir inside him. An ache, a memory not fully formed. Someone had cared once. Someone had whispered his name before it became a number. He just couldn't find her face. "Do you ever think we'll be forgiven?" he asked. Lyra looked over at him. "For what?" "For surviving." She tilted her head. "I think we don't need forgiveness," she said. "We didn't ask to be made. We didn't choose to be weapons. We just are." He didn't answer. But the words sank deep. Because she was right. They weren't monsters. They were consequences. They spent days repairing what they could. The old comms tower gave them limited access to star maps, and they managed to boost power from solar fields buried in the hills. Lyra calibrated the last working telescope to keep an eye on the outer systems. Rian spent most of his time rebuilding a transmitter, not to call for help, but to listen. And when the signal finally came through, it wasn't a distress call, it was a name. His, spoken in a voice he hadn't heard since Vault Sigma. 2. The signal was faint, encrypted, but unmistakable. She was alive. He played it again and again, trying to decipher her tone. She didn't ask for help. She didn't demand anything. All she said was, "You were right. We're not made for war anymore. I'm done running. If they come for me, I'll make them see. Even if it's the last thing I do." It wasn't surrender. It wasn't peace. It was something else, a choice, just like Lyra made, just like Rian had made when he didn't ask her to use the word. He sat on the roof of their shelter that night, staring at the stars, wondering how many others were still out there. Were there more? Were there others like them? Others buried and forgotten? He didn't know. He didn't care. He wasn't going to start another war. He wasn't going to finish one either. But if the world came to his door again, this time, he'd stand on his own terms. Lyra joined him without speaking. They watched the sky together, not looking for enemies, just looking. She leaned into his shoulder. He didn't move away. "Rian," she whispered, "if we die here one day, we won't. But if we do, I'm glad it was with you." He looked down at her. Her eyes were closed, her lips soft, her heart still beating with that same rhythm he remembered from the chamber. He brushed her hair back and whispered, "So am I." Somewhere, far beyond their hidden planet, war drums still echoed. Empires still rose and fell. Ships still hunted ghosts. New prototypes were likely being built from shadows. The wheel turned. But here, in the ruins of a forgotten colony, 2 broken weapons became people again. And that was enough.